first and foremost, I'd like to really thank all of you for joining in today. The topic of today's session is big data, judge before you leap. Today we are going to, in this session particularly, we are going to look into the world of big data from a marketer's point of view. All what it takes to build intimacy with your customers, which they in any way expect from you. So to lead this session, we have with us Jaideep Mehta. Jaideep leads the IDC India. In fact, when he joined IDC in 2011, he was the one who has set up operations of IDC in India and subsequently in South Asia. Those of you who don't know about IDC, IDC is actually a leading firm in offering advisory and technology research related services. And overall, Jaideep is known for as a business leader with a track record of producing winning results. So I'm really delighted and excited to have Jaideep with us here today. Thanks, Jaideep, for taking time out. Before we begin our session, just let me set the logistics. By default, all of you are muted. So at any time during this session, if you have any question, I would request you to please type it down in the question panel. We will have the presentation for about 30-35 minutes. And then we'll take up all the questions in the chronological order. And during the course of time, if there is anything you want to have an open conversation about, then you can press the hand raise button and I'll unmute you and we'll have an open conversation. So that's it from my side. Jaideep, over to you. We can start the session now.
Thanks, Kapil. And thank you for having me here, both from a personal perspective and also for the opportunity to, I suppose, showcase some of the research we do here at IDC. And to all the attendees, thank you for taking time out as well. Really appreciate it. It's wonderful to have the opportunity to speak to you and share some of my thoughts with all of you folks. So just a couple of bits and pieces before we jump into the slide deck. Really, the intent here is to try and make it as much of a business-focused conversation as possible. And within that, as Kapil said, I'm focused more on making it a marketing community-centric / vendor-centric sort of presentation. Having said that, if there's any of you folks who are online whose responsibilities are in sort of user or end user organizations, I'm sure there's lots of lessons you can take away from here as well. And I look forward to having a nice interactive session. That's always more fun. So there you are. So let me just jump in quickly. And I'd like to just start with a little bit of a story and hopefully bring this alive for the benefit of all the folks on the phone or on the webinar. So if you look at big data and what it really means today from a business perspective, here's a very I think day-to-day but also very interesting use case. If you think about someone who's sort of going to a shopping mall, and as she's crossing a store, she's identified by the store through a location-based service as someone who's of interest to them. Okay. And what they do subsequently is they push a message either through through an app that she's got on the phone or even through a simple SMS, which is effectively an offer enticing her to come into the store. And as as hopefully there'll be no surprise here, what tends to happen next is that there are special offers available, creating footfall in the store, leading to transactions and revenue growth and hopefully some profit for the store. Now, this is a fairly straightforward use case on the face of it. But on the back of it, there's a lot of interactive systems and technologies at play. And let me just walk through some of these things with you. So when that individual is identified, clearly that can only happen if the mobile phone number that they're using is on the database of the store or indeed the software services provider, which typically translates into the fact that he or she is a loyalty card holder. And what we find, how retailers are optimizing this, or indeed how product manufacturers are optimizing on this, is that they're analyzing shopping patterns on the back of the loyalty card that is being used, and creating sometimes on the fly and sometimes sort of library based offers that are pushed onto the individual's mobile phone, thereby triggering a footfall and a subsequent sale. Now, if you think about this, the first two, three boxes there really constitute the identification process. Then there's a communication process, and then clearly there's a transaction process, right? And this mashes up a number of technologies that are being increasingly used today. There's the notion of big data in terms of using multiple data sources to identify someone and then categorize and segment them in a particular way. Then there is the use of mobility technologies to actually push the offer onto the mobile phone. And then clearly there's the transaction processing involved in point of sale systems, which further enriches the database and creates a much richer cycle, hopefully, for next time. So that's sort of what the background looks like, right? So moving on from this use case, I think one of the messages that we really give to our customers, both on the vendor side as well as users of technology, what we're finding today across industries, and especially when it comes to the notion of analytics and big data technologies, is that the business community's demands or the business imperatives are actually changing much faster than technology investments are growing. And that's creating a positive pressure on the technology community, whether it be the CIO or the IT vendors and so on, to actually service their stakeholders and customers, like you folks who are in the marketing departments, or other business users who may be in supply chain or in other parts of the business. Okay. But the good news is that survey after survey that we run, what we find is that not only is IT becoming more and more important and strategic in the mind of the business leaders, but actually when we compare it to other countries internationally, and I've given an example here from some of the other Asia Pacific countries and focused in more on the emerging countries like India, or emerging markets as they're called, what you find is that, with probably the sole exception of Thailand, right, in a pretty comprehensive survey that we ran across Asia Pacific last summer, 1,600 people that we spoke to, these are folks who are in the C-suite. Almost 60% said to us that they want to be using technology more aggressively than they were in the past. And a further sort of 30-35% said we're going to be using technology at least as much as we did in the past. So not only are business demands rising, but there is a acknowledgement and a recognition from the C-suite that technology can actually help us to create more competitive, more profitable, more sustainable businesses, which is of course wonderful news for all of you who are looking to leverage technology on the one hand in terms of getting funding for projects that you might have or ideas that you might want to run, and also for the vendor organizations who are obviously selling to certain budgets that are allocated to their particular domains. One other point I'd just like to make here, if you see one of the probably the only country which is starkly different on this slide is Korea, where some 90% of the people say about the same as in the past. This is keeping in mind that Korea is a highly mature market, and especially in the context of big data analytics, mobility technologies. So they are seen not just as leaders in Asia, but our research suggests that they're actually leading the world in terms of adoption of some of these technologies and leveraging them in the business. So just keep that in mind there. Okay. So when we think about business leaders and we say, well, okay, so you want to leverage technology and it's important to you and it's growing in importance to you. Well, the next thing that we then ask them is, they say, well, from a business perspective, where do you want to actually use this? And we took the India cut out of the 1,600 kind of folks that we surveyed. And keep in mind, this was 2013, when our economy was still very much mired in recession and all the rest of it. And what was interesting to see was that even third, fourth quarter last year, when the slowdown was biting and it was at its peak, the number one sort of priority that business leaders had was actually they still wanted to drive growth, and revenue growth was still absolutely the key. And reducing cost came a distant second. It's also interesting that improved customer service was as little as under a fifth of people telling us that this is a top priority for them. But really, the big story here is around productivity improvements, thereby driving profitability and focusing ever more on revenue enhancing capabilities and driving growth on the back of that. Okay. So if you were to now put this in the context of big data, and if IT is becoming more strategic and people still want to grow rapidly, where does big data come into play? Okay. So the way I categorize it for you and to kind of bring it alive, right? The essence of big data is in the ability of these technologies to analyze ever more or ever larger volumes of data, which are of different varieties. So they're coming from a variety of sources. They could be structured data of the type that you find in databases, or they could be unstructured data of the type that you find in email boxes. It could be demographic data. It could be point of sale data. And that's the essence of big data, right? It's a variety of sources which are being used in large volumes, and we typically talk in terms of terabytes of data when we use the term big data. And they tend to be increasing in their velocity as well. And what we mean by that is that the data is hitting the organization boundaries, whether from external sources or internally, at ever greater speed. And really, the companies who are winning and who are able to really deliver real business value from the analytics that sit on top of all of this data is those who are able to convert the data into meaningful business information or decision support information at very, very high speed. If you mark this back to the shopping example that I started this talk with, what you'll find is that there is a significant amount of data which is being processed in the backend, which is coming, as I said, from a variety of sources: loyalty card databases, the person's demographics, the fact that he or she is actually in the shopping mall at that time is obviously fed through GPS and mobile phone kind of systems. And then you're able to push to them a very specific offer immediately. And that's the velocity point. Okay. And it's the confluence of these three that causes real business value to be created in that particular context, a sale transaction or a series of sale transactions. So these are the four things that you must remember when it comes to big data. But big data doesn't operate in a vacuum. And one of the things that we've been researching here at IDC, which I'd like to share with you, is that what we see happening in the world today, if I put this in the context of history, computing started with what we call the first platform, which were the days of the mainframes and the dumb terminals and so on and so forth. And through the 80s primarily, and through, I guess, the early part of the 90s from an India context, we migrated to the second platform of computing, which was PC-centric at the client end, which is what you and I were using. And at the back end, we were talking about local area networks, we were talking about connectivity, and the internet started to come in. And really all the applications, by and large, that we were using were client-server architecture. What we are seeing happening today is the transition of the second platform to the third platform, where the PC is going the way of the dinosaur in a hurry. And just to give you some context here, we just put out a numbers for Q1 from an India market perspective, and the PC market actually shrank by 25%. So this is not a gradual shift. This is a very, very sudden shift, which has caught a lot of industry players unawares as well. And the third platform of computing is characterized by the four popular technologies, which in India we tend to call the SMAC technologies, and big data is of course right in the middle of it. But in IDC parlance, these are the four pillars of the third platform. And what this is triggering is a change in the way IT is bought and consumed across the ecosystem of the economy. And I've given you sort of 6-7 examples there to help you to understand what we mean by this. So, just to take one case, if you take the notion of connected vehicles, all of you will be aware, I'm sure, of Google's driverless cars, which they are now about to hit about 1 million kilometers of testing on the highways of the United States. But even closer to home, the next version of the electric cars from Mahindra, they actually have a SIM card inside them, and they're spewing out telemetry data as they're getting used, which Mahindra is then using to not just feed into the next generation of product design, but also they're sharing it with the likes of insurance companies, for example, to help them to price insurance policies better. They're using them for diagnostics and predictive maintenance. So the entire paradigm of car maintenance and car servicing is shifting. The entire paradigm of car design, the new product development, everything is getting transformed on the back of these new technologies. And if I were to move you to the left-hand side of the slide, which is sort of equally important, right? Systems are moving into services. So I guess the easiest to visualize example here is software, where typically you would have software in your data center or in your server room, and then they'd be consumed by people who are in the company. But now with Salesforce.com as the most popular example, everything is coming in as a service. And what this is triggering is, the notion of agile IT is becoming more and more outdated. And what business leaders are demanding and what marketeers like you are demanding is that I have the ability to be agile from a business perspective. So IT should be able to help me rather than hinder me in launching new marketing programs very, very quickly, in being able to launch localized sales promotions, for example, or launch bundled offers, etc. Whereas historically, technology functions used to be a deterrent. More and more what we are finding is in the companies that are winning in the marketplace, they're actually not just being not deterrents, but actually being supportive of this. And consequently, the notion of the role that IT plays in any organization is moving from information provision to actually innovation enablement. And innovation enablement is where things like connected cars, smart buildings, connected health phones start to play a part. So this is the bigger picture in terms of the technology shift. And keep in mind that when we talk about big data, very rarely will you find yourself doing real programs or real projects which are big data centric, which exclude technologies such as the cloud from an infrastructure perspective, or mobile technologies from a client perspective, or indeed the induction of social business, whether it's social media or internal social technologies as well. Okay, so that's just to give you a kind of a broader context. But let me bring you back to big data now with the larger context in play. And what does this mean? Big data, like I said, is about fundamentally converting various sources of data of large volume hitting you at high speed into sensible business information which can be used to take decisions. So the first stage in this, of course, is actually data creation. And as you can see some examples over there, whether it's machines and sensors or it's email and messaging, good old-fashioned databases, there are various sources from which data is actually created. But what do we actually do with this? So once it's created, the next step is actually to capture it, or what we call data acquisition. And there are various technologies and paradigms out there. Hadoop is a popular one. You can outsource this as well to cloud-based service providers today. Put in more and more sophisticated storage infrastructure, etc., or go to some vendors who provide you with in-memory computing capabilities to be able to acquire and then actually process data to convert it to something more sensible, create modeling scenarios, create decision support data on the back of it, find patterns which are contextual to your business, and do this at high speed, or what on the slide you can see as real-time events, right? So once the data gets created, you acquire it, store it, process it, and then you can actually inject it into various business processes. And the example of the shopping mall is really right there, which is the location-based services kind of use case. But there are various other examples and paradigms which I share with you on this slide. So it is the journey from step 1 through step 4 which converts data being created by various sources into sensible business information which can be used profitably by a business. Okay. So if I crack on and give you another context, right? So what does all this actually mean? And where are we today from a business perspective in terms of, the awareness of how to leverage it and how to use it, right? So interestingly, only about 40 to 50% of the stakeholders in the ecosystem of big data actually truly begin to understand it. And clearly, this is a huge opportunity for the vendor ecosystem, but also a huge opportunity for those marketeers who may be in companies where they do understand it. Because what this also means is that if you're able to convert this into sensible business information ahead of your competitors, then you can actually drive some pretty significant business benefits out of it and create incremental competitive advantage for you, right? And what we are finding in terms of use cases, which interestingly also goes back to some of the business priorities that were shared with us in the survey slide I presented earlier. Whether it's attracting new customers and thereby driving revenue growth, improving productivity, reducing costs, doing more efficient planning, and indeed planning expansion planning, whether it's expansion of supply chains or distribution optimization. These are the use cases that we are seeing today, and there are many others, by the way. These are just some of the examples where big data is actually being used and where it's getting converted into a day-to-day sort of business decision system kind of paradigm. Okay. And what we find is that if you were to now map this onto what are the business challenges, so what you saw earlier was the business priorities that the C-suite had. But when you ask them about business challenges, they talk about the fact that competition is increasing, our costs are increasing, and we are finding greater and greater barriers to expand into new markets. So when you think about your own business, increasing competition means growth becomes more and more difficult, and especially profitable growth becomes exceedingly difficult. And clearly, increasing internal costs means that your margins are getting squeezed, and all of this leaves less surplus to invest in expansion. So big data can help in all of these, but it can only help when you have the right people. So one of the big challenges that we find from an execution perspective, CIOs tell us, and indeed even when the vendor community tells us, that there is a severe shortage of people who can actually help us to convert big data concepts into big data reality. And almost 1/3 or even close to 40% of organizations said to us that we simply don't have the people with the right skill sets. Now, what are these skill sets? And I'll give you a couple of good examples in this. So one very important skill set in this context is the skill set of what we call data scientists. People who have the ability to actually take the organization from the journey from stage 1 to stage 4, which you saw a couple of slides ago, and make sense of the multifarious sources of information and convert that, right? But an equally interesting challenge is actually making the business case and making sure that the CFO or the CEO actually signs off on the investment so that the necessary technology infrastructure, the service providers, etc., can be brought into play and the projects can be kicked off. And even today, and I guess this goes back to the awareness issue, a full fifth of the organizations almost tell us that they're still finding it challenging to figure out, of the masses and mountains of data that they've got sitting in their internal systems, which data is actually the most relevant. Where do we begin? So we said, right, so how do we move on from here? And how do we actually overcome these challenges? And what are the things that we should consider when we are actually kicking off a big data kind of program? So the next 4 or 5 slides really are actually converting some of these findings and some of these concepts into things that you can take away, and especially bullet pointing those big themes that we find are essential ingredients to success. Whether you're pitching to an end user as a vendor organization, whether you're trying to create a marketing program within your organization, or indeed if you're working in a CIO's organization and trying to figure out how do I make sense of all of this stuff, right? So here we go. So the first thing, what we always say is that big data is about big impact. And if I were to convert that to a different way, what we say is think big, start small, and scale rapidly. So when you're thinking about big data, remember always that big data is about enterprise-wide impact. But to be able to create that enterprise-wide impact, you need to have the early wins. And we always advise our clients that the early wins should come in some area or some use case where you have the ability to accrue revenues. In other words, the boards and the CEOs will always get more excited if you're doing something which is adding growth to the organization. So that's the first thing. So you think big, you start small with a pilot or a proof of concept, and the moment you are able to deliver the promised impact, then you should have the ability to scale up and scale out very, very rapidly. That's takeaway number 1. The important thing in today's ecosystem with regard to this takeaway is it's not just a mental process. It's also about making sure that you have the right partner ecosystem who's working with you. What we find today is that there is more or less no organization on either the technology front or on the end user front who has all the skills and capabilities available in-house to be able to drive big data programs successfully. So what we always advise our clients is that you should go out into the market and make sure that before you kick off the program, and that's the important thing, before you kick off the program, you have the right partner ecosystem in place so that as and when the early wins are delivered, you have the ability with the partners to scale up and scale out the program very, very quickly, right? The second thing which we always tell marketeers and business leaders that please don't ignore the CIO. And what we mean by that is that while there is in today's day and age the ability for the first time ever actually for business leaders to literally from start to finish to drive technology programs such as a big data program on their own, what we find is that life becomes much easier if they get the CIO and their team engaged as well. And why is that? The reason that we always advise is that because to actually make a big data program successful, inevitably there is a lot of internal integration work that is required. For example, databases need to talk to each other, security issues come into play, and so on and so forth. And for these are matters which are best left to the CIO and their organization. As marketeers, as business intelligence folks, this is neither in your realm of capability, nor frankly should you be bothering about it, because you've got experts in your teams, in your organizations who can actually help you with this. The second dimension to why we say work with the CIO, even if you're able to deliver the program, with a particular set of vendors or with a preferred partner, what we find is 6 months or 12 months down the line, when ultimately the partner will want to sign off and walk out, you will need the CIO and his team to help you to maintain the systems, to keep upgrading them from time to time, to keep enriching them as your business needs evolve and change. And if they're not involved, then it becomes incredibly expensive for you to keep working with vendors all the time. So there should be a hybrid model in place where you've got some elements of internal IT and some elements of the partner ecosystem, and the CIO is fully bought in emotionally as well to the project that you're running. Okay. The third thing, which I've sort of touched upon already, which is what we call follow the money. To be able to get big data programs off the ground, the simple first sort of lighthouse that you want to look at as you're sailing through the sea is where will I have the most impact from a revenue perspective. I've talked about this, so I won't go into this in much detail, but just to reiterate this point. And finally, and this is something that we see happening again and again, when the program is new and it's brilliant and it's exciting, it's fantastic, everyone's got their eyes on it. The moment you go into implementation mode, what we find is that it becomes messy, it becomes about good old project management. Suddenly data issues start to crop up, things start to maybe go wrong, you need to get them back on the rails again, and a lot of key stakeholders start to lose interest. So the governance model that you think about, the governance model that you put in place, you must have involvement, especially if it's a big program. And most importantly, the project owners who've kicked off the program, they must have the ability, the patience, the bandwidth, the time to actually see it through to fruition. It is, we've unfortunately seen a lot of projects which have been abandoned for no reason other than the fact that the business leaders who started it off moved on to the next flavor of the month. And that's not doing themselves any favors, and it's obviously resulting in a lot of wasted resources. So these are 4 or 5 pointers that I wanted to just leave with you when we talk about big data programs and the kind of impact they can have, and some of the things you should keep in mind when you're starting these off, right? But now as you move forward, I'm giving you an example from the manufacturing sector as to what's coming next, right? What's coming next is a whole bunch of new enabling technologies which will continue to enable you to have ever richer and ever greater sort of big data programs out there, which can create an ever, a much larger impact than ever before. And some examples of these, we are finding the first wave of M2M technologies catching on. We are finding that more and more organizations, as they get their fundamental master data cleaned up and sorted out, and they have the big data sort of databases put in place, they're able to do more and more predictive analytics, leading to more informed decision making. They're de-risking investment programs. They're able to segment their customers in ever more micro markets, create more specific products and offerings for them, thereby driving higher profit margins, creating more competitive positions for themselves. And all of this is leading to the leaders in various sectors actually increasing their lead from a market share perspective and profitability perspective from those who are not quite able to do this yet. So we've actually done a sectoral analysis, which unfortunately I don't have the time to present today, where we looked at 4 or 5 key sectors, and we looked at, for example, the decorative paints industry. We looked at the automotive industry. We looked at banks. We looked at ITES companies, and what we found was that there is a significantly high correlation between the sectoral leaders from a market share and profitability perspective and their technology maturity overall. Now, whether it's the leadership causing the maturity in technology, or the maturity in technology kind of causing leadership, we do not know. The causal analysis is very, very hard to do. But I can tell you that there is a correlation of almost zero point 0.9, which is almost as high as it gets in the real world, between organizations who are seen as leaders in their field from a business metrics perspective and those who have technology maturity. So this is very, very important. So to quickly summarize, and I'm conscious I'm coming up to 35 minutes, which is the promised presentation time. Always keep in mind, big data is about business outcomes. Big data is not about technology programs. Big data by and large are not programs which are run by the technology department of a company. And most importantly, no one should get lost in the technology. You should get into the technology of big data enough so that you can leverage it. As I mentioned previously, there are enough partners out there today who have the ability to help you with this. You have CIOs in your organizations who can help you with this. Focus on the business use cases, the business programs, the business outcomes, and leverage technology, but don't get lost in it. Treat it like a business program. Use the old-fashioned disciplines of big impact, getting the other stakeholders in place, putting your efforts where the leverage is the highest. In other words, follow the money, and see it through all the way. Treat it like a program, like any other program. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. Happy, as Kapil said, to take any questions, and hope to have some discussions before we sign off today. So thank you for your time and patience today. Appreciate the attention you've given me. And over to you, Kapil.
Great. Thanks a lot, Jaideep, for a great overview on the world of big data. I was thinking big data actually means different to different people. So before we start the Q&A, let's just get what all people are here. I think that will make it more constructive in terms of the kind of Q&A we can do. So I have just created this poll question. If all of you can respond to this, what is the size of your organization, like the organization you represent as an entrepreneur or as a company you work for, in terms of their yearly revenue? So if you could just mention it, I'll just share the results with all of you, and that would possibly make it more concrete in terms of the kind of questions we should ask. So 40% of you have responded. Can I have everybody please respond to this so that we can move on? Let's do it quick.
Where is I can't actually see the poll. You can see it, Kapil? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can see that. I'll just share it with you as well. Give me a minute. Participants can see it and I can see it. I think probably you can see it. Got it. So I'm closing the poll now. So here are the results. Jaideep, I'm not sure whether you can see this or not, so I'll just read it out to you. 26% said that they represent a company with less than 1 CR revenue. 26% have said that they represent a company between 1 CR and 15 CR. 8% are between 15 CR to 100 CR as an yearly revenue. 26% have said more than 100 CR companies, and 15% actually do not represent any company. So I think it's dominated with a good percentage of them are from organization with more than 100 crores, and about 50% are from less than 1 crore or between 1 crore to 15 crore. So I hope that gave you some idea on the kind of people that are there. One thing that I want to start with is this whole world of big data. When you were talking about the various phases of implementation, from creation to acquisition, moving on to processing and taking business decisions out of it. I mean, I was thinking as a business leader, I've been doing it from last 15 years, and so when it comes to the world of big data, what is it that really classifies that now I'm leveraging big data? Is it a size of data, or is it when I start using frameworks like Hadoop and all. What really
Hmm.
gives me that feel that okay, now I'm really talking about big data. It's not the normal data stuff that I was doing earlier. So, and since there's a lot of buzz around it, I'm sure a lot of people would be confused with a similar question. So, if you could just
Okay.
explain the, yeah.
Okay. See, there's that. Yeah, sure. So there's a definition of it, which varies by organization. So IDC has a definition as well,
Mhm.
which, like most things that we put out there, kind of becomes the industry benchmark. So we talk about a minimum of three sources of data, 60% year-on-year data growth, at least 100 terabytes of storage, as the three foundational pieces before we start classifying a company or an organization's environment as a big data environment. Okay. Now, in the real world, and especially in the SME space, that especially the size piece is not necessarily that important. You could have 2 terabytes of data which you can do lots of magic with to help you drive business. So the important thing is this, right? So compared to what was happening before, so when we talked about business intelligence, which, as you rightly talk about, is around as long as computing's been around, typically the key difference in the last 4 to 5 years where big data comes into play is the ability now that technology has enabled for us to analyze unstructured data, number one, and to match together internal and external sources of data, number two. So what do I mean by unstructured data? Emails is a great example. Scanned documents is another one. Let me tell you a real story here, right? Just 2, 3 months ago, I was with the chief operations officer of one of India's largest private sector banks. They're clients of ours. And we were talking about, so what had happened was they also run an investment banking arm, so they have retail broking and so on. And a very famous case where one company took over another company, and the High Court actually stayed that takeover process because there were suspicious transactions in the stock price of the company which was being taken over. So there was insider trading, etc., which was being alleged. Now, the the suspicious trades actually happened through the broking arm of this particular client of ours. So SEBI called them and said, I need to see the transaction data, the emails exchanged with that client, the phone recordings that you have, and I want them by the end of day today. And this call came to them at about lunchtime. Okay. Now, if you don't have big data systems in place, you can't comply with this regulatory requirement. Okay. This is a real story. Now, you could ask, well, what happens if I send it tomorrow morning? Nothing, except they'll probably slap a 50 crore fine right on the bank. And this is very real numbers. And this has happened on Wall Street again and again, especially with the insider trading crusade that the district attorney of New York has been going on. And, the most famous fish in the net there was, of course, Rajat Gupta. So, so big data is about multifarious sources of data, unstructured and structured. And they needed to pull out the, put them in one neat package and send them off to the regulator in a matter of 4 to 5 hours. Okay, so that's just to bring it alive. Now, if you're a small company today, right, and let's say you're providing a service, and it may be a B2B service or a B2C service. It doesn't matter, right? You can still use the principles of big data and big data technologies because there are lots of service providers now available to actually convert some of the information sitting in your databases and mash that up with external information and convert that into sensible business information, right? So if you take a software startup, for example, who's servicing three different industries, there's a whole bunch of things they can do. If you're a small retailer today, there's a whole bunch of things they can do in mashing and analyzing the point of sale data with the demographics of the people walking into the store, with location-based information through their mobile phones, and doing exactly what I said in slide 1 and 2, for example. If you're a small manufacturer, you still have a supply chain, you may be buying from other people. You can use big data technologies to take cost out of your supply chain, reduce your time to market, and build ever closer relationships with your suppliers. So there's any number of possibilities, and I will urge all the folks who are listening in to actually focus in on this. So it's really, to me, it's not that important, aside frankly from research purposes, to worry about the definition of big data or what technologies constitute big data. What's important is, what can I take away from this evolution? In fact, I call it a revolution, and apply to the business environment or the organizational environment that I am in, and how do I actually convert that into profitable decisions for myself? Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. I mean, just to
Okay.
As a follow-up of that, there's a question also asked by
Mm.
Ajit Joshi. He wants
Mm-hmm.
to know how can small
Mm-hmm.
business do with big data, and without the data scientists or Hadoop professionals, how can they leverage on the big data coming from various sources? I mean, just to create a little background before you respond to that, um, um, for example, if I look at Digital Vidya as an organization, we would have an opt-in of
Mm.
about 40, 50,000 users, and some
Mm.
similar size of traffic and web and social data coming in. Is it that, I mean, I should really worry about big data as a small organization? And can you suggest
Mm.
some tool, some off-the-shelf tool or something to create that early win which you were talking about, so that, as in, like, for about organization about from 0 to 15 crore size organizations, is there something that, I mean, we can
Mm.
just taste it and see, yeah, it's of value for us?
Mm. Sure, sure. See, I mean, I won't sort of on a public forum recommend any particular tool or vendor or any tool, but I'll give you a couple of scenarios and point you in a couple of directions, right? So to answer the question of whether it's a digital vidya or a small manufacturer, right? See, the fact that the data is sitting there. So as if you take the example of digital vidya, you've got a 50,000 people database, you've got number of emails, etc. In itself is not meaningful. Okay. The question is really, the starting point is that what are the business decisions that I want to take where I am being blindsided at the moment, or I'm taking quote unquote on gut feel. So for example, let's take an example, right? We ran this webinar today. Hmm? Now, the reason we ran this webinar today was because there was a view at your end that big data will be interesting to my audience,
Yeah.
right? And then we had a conversation. I said, sure, I can help you with this. Now, this was a classic case of an intelligent decision being made, and we've got some 60 people who agree with us, by the way, who spent an hour of their time on this call. But this is a classic case of an intelligent decision being made on gut feel and understanding of the ecosystem and so on. Now imagine a world where you're able to sift through the emails that you have, where you're doing keyword searches for what is of interest to people. The answer may well be, tell me about the latest risk management systems in banks. It may well be about mobility. It may well be about big data, right? So here's an example for you. Do you need to invest in masses of technology for this? Absolutely not, right? So today you can go in the direction of some of the very large tech vendors. Microsoft comes to mind, who will happily sell you, or indeed increasingly rent you, both the infrastructure and the applications, and connect you with the right partners in their ecosystem who can be your service providers. So you have the whole package, and of course they'll encourage you to use Microsoft technologies for that. Okay. uh, and I guess this is also the question that Ajit Joshi was asking, right? So
Yeah.
so that's why I was saying, I said, don't worry about the technology piece. Worry about, if I've got all of this stuff sitting there, where can I inject? And that's why, if you go back a few slides, in fact, if you folks can still see my screen, I'll take you back there. Just give me 1 second, right? I want to take you back to this particular screen, where if you see the fourth stage of this, right, what we talk about is the business process, right? So 1 and 2 you can
Jaideep,
leave
yeah,
to the
got it.
techies. Right. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I mean, the slide was not visible earlier. Now it is visible.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you said there's a little lag, right? So now you can see it.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm really talking about is, as a business leader or as a business owner, think of stage number 4 and go backwards from there, right? So think about, where can I use big data principles? Where can I have interventions based on big data, which will help me to make better business decisions? Get the partners organized. It's almost a case of starting with 4 and then doing 1, 2, 3, leading back to 4 in a loop. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you don't necessarily need to start with a Hadoop environment, or go and spend tons of money on buying high-end servers or lots of storage. A lot of this you can get through cloud-based providers today, and you can 100% get this with, like I said, with some of the big technology houses and their partner ecosystems.
Got it. So, I mean, just to, as a follow-up also, and I think you have answered it, but just to put
Mm.
it in light perspective, Sunil has a question that, what is the starting minimum cost for less than 1 CR company, which is just 2-year old, and we
Mm.
do not have too much of a data? So is there some minimum
Hmm.
cost, or like it's it depends on the business
No.
process? Got it.
So well, I think if you're at that scale, I wouldn't worry about big data right now. Okay. The reason I say that is because if you're at a less than 1 crore, and indeed, frankly, even if I were to scale that up to maybe less than 3 to 5 crores, right? I would imagine that it's an entrepreneur driven company. And frankly, at that scale, gut feel is good enough because your business ecosystem is not big and complex enough yet for you to start really worrying about analytics based on big data and what can I do with it and so on. So I would say at a sub 1 crore scale, it's not that important unless you have a very specific use case that you want to kind of start working on. And frankly, also at that scale, you'll probably struggle with the investments you need to make, even if you were to outsource the whole thing, because there's still capex required. It may well be rental capex, but you still need to have funding available. And in terms of, to answer your question on what's the minimum, I mean, I've seen companies spending 20 lakhs as a small pilot. I've seen companies spending 1 crore as a pilot, and I've then seen big analytics and big data. I mean, there's no upper limit really. You can, big global companies spend hundreds of millions of dollars on this stuff now. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of analytics companies are growing out of India very, very rapidly, like some Mu Sigma and Fractal Analytics and Absolute Data and so on. They've grown from 0 to 20, 0 to 30 million in very, very rapid time because there's so much spending happening on the buy side, right? But frankly, less than 1 crore, don't worry about it too much yet.
Got it. Great. I think that definitely gives us a perspective.
Hmm.
So another question is asked by Tina. He's saying, "Hi Jaideep, thank you for a very effective and quick presentation. My question is, in bracket, blame it to ignorance. What are the privacy-related issues that big data is still
Hmm.
grappling with, and what do you
Hmm.
think, and how do you think people are embracing this technology despite these gray areas? Could you please share some examples on that?"
Right. Uh, Actually, that is an absolutely brilliant question. So please don't feel defensive about it. I've actually, I think it's as well, but I'd put in a piece in the Financial Express some time ago exactly around this issue. But I've reproduced it on my blog, so you can go and take a look. I think that the blog, that particular post is titled "Big Data Something or the Other." I can't remember exactly now. That's my blog right there. So it'll give you a more detailed answer to your question, Tina. Um, Big data privacy issues, big problem, big challenge. It's causing a lot of people to get creeped out, to put it in good, old-fashioned American English. Um, that marketeers can crawl around on their social profiles, especially and kind of then use that data for business decision making purposes and so on. The sad reality is that if you were to go and read the T's and C's of practically any social platform that you use today, whether you use Twitter, whether you use Facebook, LinkedIn, Tumblr, Flickr, any of these guys, what you'll find is that you've actually signed away your privacy whether you like it or not. Okay, so the very fact that you're using it, every time you sign up as a new member, you probably never read it, neither do I, frankly, that 62-page font size 6 terms and conditions that you have to click agree before they'll allow you to do anything. That's one challenge. And then you will find that they periodically, quote unquote, update it. And that update is usually about an increasing weakening of privacy. And Facebook has actually been condemned in the US, for example, for this, but they're not moving because ultimately they need to make money off their platform, and they can't make money if they don't mine your data. So it's six of one and half a dozen of the other, really. Where we are still somewhat more protected at the moment, but that's going away very fast as well, is the ability for organizations to track us using GPS on our mobile phones. But what I suspect is that as location-based services catch on, the mobile phone providers are going to make this an essential condition of service as well. And you'll have the ability to say, no, don't track me, in which case they'll say, okay, well, you can't use my data service then. So um, privacy is a thorny issue. I think the law, not just in India, but across the world, is very far behind the reality of technology today. Probably the folks who are closest to it are the continental Europeans, especially France and the Nordic countries, where they have very strict laws. So what the best case scenario realistically today looks like is that your data is mined, etc., etc., but there has to be a minimum level of aggregation before it can be turned over to a commercial organization. So rather than, let's say, couples and mine and your individual records going to, XYZ marketing company, they have to aggregate it based on demographic or psychographic or whatever it might be. And that is, frankly, a small comfort. It's a small crumb. But that's what the Europeans are doing to find a happy middle between privacy and the need for the social platforms that we all love using to continue to make money. Okay, so that's where the privacy laws are today. This challenge, by the way, is also on the cloud ecosystem, where the manifestation of this is on where is the data sitting, or what is commonly in legalese known as data sovereignty issues. So in India today, for example, the RBI is very clear that no bank is allowed to move their customer data outside of India. Or let me rephrase that. So what they're saying is you cannot store customer data outside of India. But interestingly, if any bank is doing using Amazon Web Services, for example, for part of their private cloud infrastructure or whatever, well, Amazon doesn't have a data center in India, so it's zipping to Singapore and coming right back. So the gray area there is that there's not a law which says you can't move the data out and bring it back, but there is a law against data being stored overseas. So there are these fine lines and small prints everywhere, which point towards is a degree of confusion in the lawmakers and in the bureaucracy about where the line should be drawn. I've had several calls from the Department of IT and the ministry asking us about what are best practices in other parts of the world and so on. And I can tell you that we are at least 3 years away from getting a sensible control and a sensible law around this area. Meanwhile, technology will continue to evolve at the rate of doubling every 3 minutes these days in terms of sophistication and its prevalence.
Great. So I think just to take up another question in the similar light, Shobna wants to know how secure is cloud environment for storing confidential data, looking at the stage of the legal at this point of time. So if there is a large organization and they really want to put all their confidential data in cloud, is it recommended? Do you recommend that?
Okay. Two things. So first of all, it's not a legal issue. The legal issue is a separate one. Security is a separate issue.
Yeah.
Though obviously breaches of security cause all kinds of legal problems, but there is a cause and effect rather than a cyclical relationship. Uh, a lot of CIOs ask us this question. Should I give my so-called confidential data to, I don't know, an IBM or Google and Amazon, etc. And I always ask the question. I said, do you feel that your own data center is more secure than that of Google's? And typically that ends the conversation very, very rapidly. Um, we tracked in our end user surveys. 2013 was the first time we tracked and we put out there in the public domain the sudden inflection point in terms of cloud adoption. Before that, it was very miserly, and the big challenge even today is around the perceptions of security. Okay, my take to all my clients is, guys, if you think that you are able to create a data center environment in your basement or in the data center of a telco where your servers are sitting, which is more secure, more advanced, more foolproof, more earthquake proof, more flood proof than that of Google or that of Amazon, then you're in the wrong business, because you should be in the data center business because you've just beaten the best giants in the world at the sophistication and security of your infrastructure. So I am a huge cloud evangelist. I've seen it deliver phenomenal savings to our clients. I've seen it create elasticity in terms of infrastructure. I've seen it give CIOs the ability to respond very rapidly to marketing programs, to cost-cutting programs, and so on and so forth, which they simply could not do with internal IT. So I would urge you, whichever organization you're in, Tina, to relook at cloud and don't worry too much about the security part of it. You'll be just fine.
Great. I think that rests concerns for a lot of us. So there's next question by Caroline. Guys, before I take up this question, I'm just launching this poll in front of you. In case you're interested in taking formal course in digital marketing, just press yes over here and someone from our team will call you. So Caroline wants to know, data scientists, you actually mentioned data scientists as a word. Data scientists are data analysts, right? Is there a particular or specific specialization that is needed for them to work on big data? Any particular reason you stated there are fewer data scientists?
Sure. Data scientists, or data science as a discipline is a relatively recent one. And um, this actually, there was a, I would say, a belated, I beg your pardon, just, I'm sorry. There was a belated realization in the technology community as well about the need and the desperate and urgent need for these folks. Now, who are these folks? These are typically folks who are very skilled at manipulating vast arrays of data. And remember, when we talk about data in the context of big data, we're not talking about just databases. Those were the old style data analysts. So the ability to be a data analyst is actually a subset of the ability to be a data scientist. Data scientists are also able to mash together unstructured information, structured information, write the algorithms to actually make sense of them, and therefore, by definition, they also have an understanding of the business that they're operating within, which very few data analysts used to have in the past, because they used to be more data junkies. Now, this discipline, actually, the reason there's a shortage today is because, put very simply, educational systems around the world were not training people to become data scientists. So what's happened in the last 4 to 5 years is the likes, and I know two particular vendors who are very active in this. EMC, the large storage vendor, they have a program called the Academy Alliance, which is their interface with multiple universities around the world, including, I think they're now working with some 22 universities in India, where they're actually funding and providing IP for courses aimed at creating data scientists and indeed cloud architects as well, which is another much required skill in much shortage. Okay, and the other vendor who's doing a lot of work in this area is actually IBM around the world, including in India. So they've been partnering, for example, with the IITs to help with this and so on. So really, I mean, this includes technological training, so likes of Hadoop and other technologies like that. Also non-relational databases, MongoDB and all of those. The fundamental data architectures, how to build a data warehouse which has structured and unstructured information in it, and then how to make sense of it. So there's a whole new paradigm of sophistication which is coming in. A lot of this information is available on the web, and if you're interested, just jump in, and I'm sure you'll find a lot of courses that are being offered as well. I believe more recently NIIT's also launched a course to create data scientists in India. I don't know about other countries, but I'm sure similar courses exist over there as well. I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
Of course.
Hmm.
So there are we have time, so we'll take a couple of more questions.
Mhm.
Since we are talking about more on the courses front, there are actually questions been asked by Avtar and Deepak, sorry, related
Mhm.
to the career in this area. And in fact, I also wanted to
Mhm.
add to that. In
Looking
terms
for
of,
a job change, cover?
or probably a new business
Kidding,
opportunity.
kidding.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, as a business owner, I see a lot of courses being floating around from the technology point of view in the big data space. Like Hadoop is being
Hmm.
one of the hottest
Yes.
selling
Yes.
training in this
Sure.
that space. So,
Hmm.
from the
Hmm.
marketing point of view, as a marketers, does it make sense to take
Hmm.
some formal course? Like one is okay if you go by the as a data scientist role, or if you go want to take a
Hmm.
technology role on it in developing the using the
Hmm.
infrastructure to do it. But as a marketer,
Hmm.
is there a formal training that you think is needed in this industry at this point of time? Is there something happening also, or like what's your take on that?
Um, Frankly, I'm not aware of any specific courses being offered by anyone which would equip a marketer. They may be out there. I'm just not aware of them. What I'm aware of is, I mean, I went and lectured at when was it? I am Bangalore, I think, a few months ago, and they are certainly including a greater component of the application of data science and marketing for those folks who are taking marketing majors in their MBA program. I'm sure other business schools are doing the same thing. I know that some of the American business schools, they now have electives for marketing majors, which are focused around. Actually, they don't call it data science; they call it leveraging social for marketing, which is a huge, probably the 80% of the use case for the application of big data in marketing is around matching social information with internal information and probably location information, and then drawing inferences out of those three things. Is there a benefit in training yourself? Absolutely. I mean, without question. The more you become aware of the possibilities, the more that you invest in understanding what is possible, what is out there, the better it is for you. Courses, I don't know, but one thing I will share with you that I have personally had the benefit of do some searches on YouTube. You'll find some very interesting short videos there which will educate you. They're put out there by tech vendors, but also by a number of CMOs and marketing executives sharing their own experiences. A lot of entrepreneurs talking about it. So there are many, many informal ways today to bring yourself up to speed. You need to just make a little bit of effort, and more importantly, take out some time and invest that time in developing yourself. So that's kind of what I could answer on that front. I'm afraid I don't have a spot on answer in terms of the marketing piece.
Great. I think that gives me some insights, and definitely intuition based insights. We'll do some big data analysis to take some business decision on it. So
Sure, sure.
there's a couple of more questions. One is from Dharminder Gupta. He wants to know, can you throw some
Hmm.
lights on use of big data in industrial marketing
Hmm.
with few examples? So
In
use
as
of,
in B2B marketing.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And possibly in manufacturing
Hmm.
sector, that's the
I'll
case.
tell you. I'll give you an example. I'll give you a real example. Um, Down in Coimbatore is one of the nation's probably the largest manufacturer of machinery for the cotton textile industry. So their customers are folks who make clothing and fabrics and so on. And one of the interesting things they've been doing is they've been going on to e-commerce sites. And I mean, this is I'm just simplifying it. There's a big sophisticated program that they're running. So they're going on to e-commerce sites and they're going on to the customers' websites. They're going on to fashion websites and screen scraping and analyzing what are the latest designs, what are the latest colors, what are the latest fabrics, which are becoming fashionable and which are becoming popular, so on and so forth, in different markets around the world. They then take that information and correlate it and attach it to the sales data of their customer. So just this is not a real thing, but for example, if I am the textile machine manufacturer and I'm selling to Arvind Mills or Raymond, let's take Raymond's, right? So I am saying, to make it very simple, which suiting fabrics are becoming more and more popular, right? Where is suiting catching on? Where is it out of style? Therefore, where is tomorrow's market for my client, and where is the market going to decline? And what will that market constitute of in terms of fabrics, etc., etc.? And I'm taking that information to my client and saying, hey, this is what we are seeing, okay? And we think, therefore, that you probably need a different type of machine than the one you ordered last time. Okay, so this is a classic case of the supplier actually adding value to their customer through big data analysis, through mashing up the external world and what's happening over there with the sales patterns of their customer, which in many cases is publicly available information because they're listed companies and so on, and converting that into a powerful marketing message. And by the way, also converting that into new products that they themselves are bringing to the market. Right? So there are applications that B2B marketers can have. From the IT ecosystem, one case study we've published, by the way, is the case study of Cognizant, where one of the many reasons that they are winning in the marketplace, they have a platform which integrates them. It's a social platform which they use internally, but they've extended it to some of their customers. Okay. And when they have engineering problems, now what's happening is that their engineers and their customers' engineers are working on these problems together. Okay, bug fixing and new features and so on. They're working on them together collaboratively to solve these problems. Okay, now again, I won't go into. I'm conscious we run out of time. But what they did do was they measured economically. So all things being equal, they realized that they were getting an 8 percentage point bounce in terms of relationship size growth with those customers where this platform was extended versus those customers where it was not extended. Real business benefit being delivered. And you know who owned that platform? It wasn't the engineers, it wasn't the account managers, it was the company's client relationship manager who is part of the marketing organization. So there are B2B use cases that we've observed. It's frankly where big data sits today, you're only limited by your imagination more than anything else. There's any number of possibilities out there. I hope that answers the
Great.
question from a B2B
I'm sure.
perspective.
Yeah,
Mm,
definitely.
mm,
So, guys, I think it's already time. Just launching this poll in front of you. How was today's session for you? So, if you've learned a lot of things, just mention the first option. If you've learned some new things, click the second option. If it was average, need improvement, the third. And if it was below average, just mention the fourth option. And I would request all of you to please give your opinion on this. And at this point of time, I really want to thank each one of you for joining in. And thanks, Jadip, for such a wonderful session. I mean, I have personally learned a lot of new things. Thanks a lot.
mm. My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. So the
And
session,
thanks to everyone who's taken time out to come on the call. Appreciate it. Hope you gain from this hour, and all the best.
got it. Great. So thanks a lot. The session is closed.
Thank you. Cheers.